The galaxy had always been a place of endless mysteries and unfamiliar wonders. It was a vast expanse filled with strange planets, alien species, and stories that spanned light years. But one story had begun to spread, a peculiar tale of Earth cats. Small, furry creatures from a long-forgotten blue planet called Earth, once thought to be nothing more than harmless companions to humans, had become the subject of fascination and confusion across the stars. No one knew how it started, but whispers of these so-called small deities had begun to circulate. The galaxy's most curious explorers couldn't wrap their minds around the idea. Cats, tiny, curious creatures, known for their independent and aloof behavior, held a mystique that far exceeded their diminutive size. They were worshipped by the ancient humans, revered as protectors of homes and symbols of wisdom. But in the context of interstellar exploration, the idea of a cat holding power or authority over anything seemed laughable, at best. Dr. Lyra Voss was one of those explorers. A researcher aboard the spacecraft Stellar Dawn, she had dedicated her life to unraveling the secrets of the galaxy's countless civilizations. Yet nothing had prepared her for the bizarre flood of reports that started arriving. The reports spoke of entire alien species believing that Earth cats were far more than just simple creatures. They were revered, venerated, and even feared. At first, Lyra dismissed the claims. She had seen countless myths and legends born from the fertile imaginations of primitive societies. Surely, these stories about cats wielding unimaginable power, guiding lost civilizations, or even controlling vast regions of space, were nothing more than the folly of overactive imaginations. But as Lyra began to sift through the growing mountain of evidence, she couldn't ignore the patterns. Alien species, from the distant corners of the galaxy, were developing bizarre rituals centered around cats. Some worshipped them as messengers of ancient cosmic forces, others as the protectors of entire star systems. It didn't matter that these creatures were barely more than foot-tall predators with soft purrs and a tendency to nap all day. To these aliens, Earth cats were something far greater, symbols of power, mystery, and perhaps even divinity. Lyra gathered her team of specialists, xenoanthropologists, geneticists, and cultural linguists. Together, they reviewed the data. Reports of alien colonies with statues of cats, historical records of divine felines, commanding respect, and most puzzling of all, accounts of strange disappearances and sightings of cats vanishing into thin air, only to reappear in different star systems. One of Lyra's top analysts, Dr. Zane Holt, studied an ancient tablet found deep within the archives of an alien civilization called the Zelvaran. The language was untranslatable at first, but after weeks of painstaking work, they uncovered a single word repeated over and over. Muistak. It roughly translated to small deities of the void. Zane looked up from his console, his eyes wide. Lyra, this isn't a coincidence. These beings are connected to something much older than we realized. The Zelvaran believed they were the keepers of a cosmic balance. They didn't just see these cats as protectors, they believed they held power over existence itself. Lyra sighed, rubbing her temples. Power over existence? That's absurd. But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the strange unease that had settled over her. The evidence was too widespread to ignore. The Zelvaran weren't the only species with stories like this. In fact, reports of similar beliefs had surfaced from dozens of other alien civilizations. Her team presented theories, some far-fetched, others grounded in science. Were the cats somehow connected to a higher dimensional force? Were they acting as intermediaries for some unknown cosmic entity? Or was it possible they carried knowledge beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered? The questions kept piling up, but no clear answers emerged. One evening, as Lyra sat alone in the ship's observation deck, gazing out at the endless stars, she couldn't shake the thought. What if these stories weren't just myths? What if the cats were more than they seemed? The galaxy was vast, filled with things they didn't yet understand. If an entire race of beings believed these creatures held power, who were they to dismiss it as fantasy? It wasn't long before Lyra began to see glimpses of something even stranger. Mysterious reports of disappearing crew members. Rumors of strange feline-like creatures stalking the shadows of uncharted worlds. The cats themselves, once just simple, curious companions, seemed to appear in places they had no business being. The stakes had shifted from mere curiosity to something much more urgent. If these ancient tales were true, if the cats were truly more than what they appeared, then the galaxy's very understanding of power, control, and existence itself might be shattered. And Lyra knew she had to uncover the truth before the mystery of the small deities changed everything. The reports kept pouring in, more bizarre and unsettling with each passing day. The team aboard the Stellar Dawn sifted through data with growing urgency, their once dismissive attitude replaced by mounting confusion and fear. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something far greater than they'd ever imagined. The conflict was no longer confined to ancient myths or distant civilizations. It had begun to seep into their own reality. Strange incidents were happening across the galaxy. On remote stations, entire crews vanished without a trace, leaving only the faintest signs of feline-like paw prints in the dust. And always, a lingering sense of unease seemed to follow. Dr. Zane Holt's team had gathered more reports of unexplainable phenomena. The Zelvarin were not the only ones. Other species, from the distant Litharians to the mysterious Elithian collective, shared eerily similar stories. Stories of cats appearing out of nowhere, vanishing into thin air, and leaving behind traces of inexplicable power. Lyra and her team began to piece together something far stranger than they had anticipated. What if these weren't random sightings? What if the cats, once thought to be mere terrestrial creatures from Earth, were acting as something more? Perhaps they weren't just passive observers, but agents of some ancient force no one could fully comprehend. The difficulty of the situation wasn't just the mystery, it was the rising tension among Lyra's team. Trust began to fracture. Every member of the crew had experienced strange phenomena in their own way. Crew members reported hearing inexplicable whispers, shadows in the corners of rooms, and fleeting glimpses of cats that didn't belong. Some even claimed they saw these cats influencing their dreams, guiding them to dangerous conclusions. One evening, after receiving another report of a missing crew member, Dr. Holt approached Lyra with a growing sense of panic. "We're not just dealing with myths anymore," he said, his voice trembling. "Whatever this is, it's real. It's happening now." Lyra nodded, but inside, she felt the weight of doubt creeping in. "But how? They're just cats. Small, harmless creatures. How could they be connected to something so powerful?" Holt hesitated, then handed her a collection of recordings. The footage showed strange distortions, moments when time itself seemed to bend, images flickering between different dimensions. The footage was incoherent, as if the laws of reality were breaking down in real time. In several of the clips, faint glimpses of those feline creatures appeared, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. Lyra watched, her breath catching. The footage wasn't of humans, nor of any alien beings they recognized. It was something else entirely, something ancient, something that defied their understanding. "What are we dealing with, Zane?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zane rubbed his face, frustration and fear in his eyes. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's beyond anything we've faced. The cats, they're not just creatures. They're conduits. Channels for something we can't comprehend." The more they dug into the phenomenon, the clearer it became that the cats were not passive beings. They weren't just simple Earth creatures anymore. Instead, they appeared to be a kind of bridge between dimensions, between the known and the unknown. Lyra began to wonder if they weren't simply observing the galaxy's mysteries, but influencing them. Yet, the galaxy wasn't standing still. Alien species who had once revered these cats had grown increasingly agitated. The Zelvarin had fallen into chaos, blaming the cats for disturbing their ancient cosmic balance. Other species reported strange shifts in their own realities, planets drifting off course, civilizations unraveling under the influence of unknown forces. It was as though the galaxy was being fractured, piece by piece. The stakes had never been higher. Lyra knew they were racing against time. If the reports were true, and the cats were truly agents of some larger cosmic power, they had to find a way to understand, or stop, whatever force was driving them before it tore the galaxy apart. The tension aboard the Stellar Dawn had reached a breaking point. Lyra barely slept, consumed by thoughts of the cats and the strange forces they seemed to wield. Reports from alien civilizations poured in, each more disturbing than the last. Some spoke of entire worlds falling silent, their inhabitants disappearing or turning into husks of what they once were. Others described eerie distortions of space and time, linked to the sudden appearances and disappearances of those enigmatic feline creatures. One morning, Lyra stood at the observation window, staring at the stars. The galaxy outside had never seemed so vast, or so terrifying. She couldn't ignore the growing certainty that they were on the brink of something far beyond her comprehension. The cats weren't passive creatures. They were connected to something far older, something far more dangerous. Then came the reports of the anomalies, distorted realities, gaps in space where entire civilizations had vanished. What if those reports were linked to the cats all along? Lyra gathered her team and studied the data, piecing together fragments of truth. The more they learned, the clearer it became, these weren't coincidences. The cats were somehow central to the unraveling of reality itself. Dr. Holt, pale and exhausted, approached Lyra with fresh findings. "We're seeing patterns, Lyra. The anomalies aren't random. They're linked directly to the cats. They appear in places they shouldn't be, and when they vanish, the fabric of reality seems to fray." Lyra nodded slowly, her mind racing. "But why? Why would these creatures, small and seemingly harmless, have such an impact on the galaxy? What could possibly connect them to such cosmic disturbances?" Holt sighed, tapping his fingers nervously. "It's like they're carriers of something older than time itself. They're not just observers, they're triggers. Whatever ancient force they serve, it's unraveling the very structure of existence." One of Lyra's other team members, Dr. MR.america, a quantum physicist, spoke up. "If they're linked to something beyond our understanding, then what if their very existence is tied to parallel dimensions? The anomalies we're seeing, the distortions in space and time, they could be signs of their presence in multiple realities at once." The room fell silent as everyone considered her words. The idea of multiple dimensions wasn't new, but no one had ever seen proof of such a connection before. What if the cats weren't just here in this galaxy, but in countless others as well? Lyra studied the reports again. In every case, the appearance of the cats preceded some kind of collapse, whether it was a society falling into chaos or entire planets vanishing into nothingness. The pattern was undeniable. What if the cats are pulling entire civilizations into these other dimensions? Lyra asked. What if they're carriers of a force that isn't just destructive, but invasive? What if their appearance is a sign that something larger is trying to break through? Holt nodded, his expression grave. "It's not just chaos we're witnessing. It's an invasion. The cats are the harbingers of something beyond our understanding." The team's once cautious skepticism had vanished, replaced by urgency and fear. Lyra knew they were racing against time, not just to understand the cats but to prevent a galaxy-wide collapse. Then came the reports from the Zelvarin. Their once proud civilization, now fractured and in disarray, sent messages of desperation. They claimed the cats had returned, and this time, they were different, stronger, more aggressive. The Zelvarin believed the cats had become something far more dangerous, something that would not stop until the balance of the galaxy had been entirely rewritten. The Zelvarin's warnings were clear: the cats were no longer harmless. They were forces of destruction, with the power to unravel the very fabric of existence. Lyra clenched her fists, determination hardening her expression. They couldn't afford to remain passive any longer. The cats were no longer myths. They were real, and their influence was spreading. If the galaxy was to survive, they had to confront the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The Stellar Dawn was thrust into chaos. The crew worked tirelessly, trying to piece together the fragments of truth, but no one had a clear answer. The once mythical Earth cats had become real, and they were far from harmless. Lyra knew the time for exploration had passed. The time to act was now. As strange occurrences mounted, the boundary between dimensions continued to blur. The fabric of reality seemed frayed, held together only by threads of uncertainty. The mysterious force linked to the cats had begun to expand, threatening not just individual species, but the galaxy itself. Dr. Holt had spent countless hours analyzing the growing data. "They're not just carriers of disruption," he told Lyra. "They are the disruption. The cats have become a conduit for something far more dangerous, something we can't control." Lyra listened but remained determined. She refused to believe that all hope was lost. Something about the reports from the Zelvarian haunted her. Their warnings, of cats growing in power, of civilizations crumbling under their influence, spoke of a force too great to ignore. But what if, beneath the chaos, there was a way to stop it? In the darkest hours of the stellar dawn, Lyra turned to an ancient theory she had once dismissed: the idea of convergence. What if these parallel dimensions weren't entirely separate? What if the cats were the key to connecting them, or worse, collapsing the distinctions between them? Dr. Miracalid, still shaken by the strange anomalies, shared Lyra's suspicion. "If the cats are disrupting reality, what if we can disrupt them? If they're agents of something larger, maybe we can become agents of change." It was a risky idea. Lyra and her team knew there was no guarantee of success. Yet, with entire civilizations falling into oblivion, they couldn't afford to do nothing. The galaxy needed a solution, and fast. With careful planning, they devised a strategy. It was unconventional and fraught with danger, but Lyra believed it might be the only chance they had. They would intercept the cats before they could unleash their power fully, using the very distortions they had caused to their advantage. Their plan revolved around the concept of reverse convergence. If the cats were drawing realities closer, they would attempt to push them apart. They would create a rupture in the space-time fabric, forcing the cats into a paradox, one that would destabilize their connection to the larger cosmic forces they were linked to. As the stellar dawn approached a particularly unstable region of space, the crew prepared themselves for what lay ahead. Lyra couldn't ignore the nagging doubt deep in her chest. What if the cats were beyond control? What if their disappearance led to an even greater chaos? Still, they pressed on. The moment of confrontation was drawing near. When they arrived at the heart of the anomalies, the scene before them was unlike anything they had ever seen. The stars themselves seemed to ripple and warp. Distortions of reality flickered in and out of existence. The cats, however, were nowhere to be found. Only their influence lingered, like a ghost of a power they had once wielded. Dr. Holt's voice trembled as he reported from his console. "They're here. They're all around us, but they're different. It's like they've become part of the very fabric of this place." Lyra's hands clenched tightly. "Then we'll tear that fabric apart." With a deep breath, she initiated the first phase of their plan. The stellar dawn activated its engines, generating a powerful field designed to disrupt the very dimensions they were navigating. The distortions intensified, the boundaries between space and time threatening to dissolve entirely. The crew felt the ship shudder as the fabric of reality bent and fractured. It was a gamble. They had no guarantees it would work, but if it did, they might be able to sever the connection between the cats and the unknown forces guiding them. Hours passed in silence. The ship's instruments flickered erratically as they raced through the anomaly. The distortion grew unbearable, stretching beyond comprehension. But Lyra refused to relent. Suddenly, in the midst of the chaos, a soft, familiar sound echoed through the corridors of the stellar dawn, a low, curious purr. It wasn't from the ship's systems. It was real. The crew froze, their breath catching in their throats. The cats had returned. They were not the same, though. They no longer appeared as the small, independent creatures they once were. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, and their forms shimmered, as if they were no longer bound by the physical laws of their universe. These were not the cats they knew. Lyra moved quickly, driven by instinct and desperation. She activated the final phase of their plan, cutting the link between dimensions, severing the connection that had allowed the cats to exist in multiple realities at once. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The glow faded from the cats' eyes. Their purring ceased. And then they vanished. The distortions began to collapse. The stars stopped warping, the fabric of reality knitting itself back together. The stellar dawn emerged from the chaos, battered but intact. In the silence that followed, Lyra felt a deep sense of relief, though a part of her wondered if the cats were truly gone, or if they had merely gone into hiding. Months passed before Lyra returned to the crew. The stellar dawn had become a beacon of caution, a reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond the galaxy's known borders. Yet, in the quiet, she couldn't ignore the truth. Some mysteries remained, hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to resurface when they least expected it. The galaxy had changed, and so had she. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever feel quite the same again. Lyra stood at the edge of the observation deck, gazing out at the now tranquil stars. The distortions were gone, the warped fabric of space had returned to normal, and the lingering presence of the strange, glowing cats had vanished. Yet, the silence that followed was far from comforting. The crew had emerged from the ordeal battered, but intact. They had survived the unknown forces, the anomalies, and the strange, once mythical creatures that had threatened to unravel reality itself. But as they now drifted back into the familiar routines of life aboard the Stellar Dawn, there was a growing unease. The data they had collected was inconclusive. The cats were gone, but the sense of impending danger still loomed over them. Dr. Holt often found himself poring over the fragmented records, searching for clues, anything that could hint at what had caused the galaxy to tremble. The anomalies had stopped, but something felt incomplete. Lyra couldn't ignore the hollow feeling deep in her chest. The galaxy had changed, but so had she. No longer the same hopeful explorer, she felt a strange burden pressing down on her. They had won a battle, but the war against the unknown, was far from over. One evening, as she reflected in her quarters, the faint sound of a purr echoed once again. It wasn't coming from a creature or a system, it was something deeper, something far more ancient. Lyra closed her eyes, remembering the glowing eyes of the cats, their strange, otherworldly presence that had lingered in the back of her mind throughout their journey. Maybe they were gone for now, but she knew better than to believe they were truly defeated. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. Some threats didn't disappear, they simply waited in the shadows, biding their time. As Lyra stared out into the galaxy once more, she whispered to herself, "The small deities may be gone, for now. But they'll return. And when they do, we'll have to be ready." The stars remained quiet, but Lyra knew that silence was the calm before the storm. The galaxy had learned the hard way why Earth's cats were once called small deities. And now, they knew better than to ask, what could possibly go wrong? Because they already knew the answer.